My wife said, "Stability look better when you're broke and alone." I replied, "This is my house." Then I ignored her texts, called a lawyer, hired a private investigator, locked down my finances, and when she finally came back to my door, the woman who answered left her completely speechless. Welcome back to WZ Tales. Today's story is about a wife who vanished with $80,000 of family savings, then came back expecting her old life to still be waiting. As you listen, think about the moment you would have stopped calling it a mistake and started calling it a choice. My name is Russell Lawson, but everyone calls me Russ. I'm 50 years old, and until last year, I thought I had a stable life. I was married to Ivan. We had 2 grown kids, Owen and Piper. I owned a few premium car wash locations that brought in around $15,000 a month, and the business mostly ran itself. My managers handled the daily work, so my life had become simple in the way middle age can feel simple when you think you've already built the hard part. Most mornings I woke up, checked the numbers on my phone, maybe drove by one of the locations if I felt like it, and spent the rest of the day fixing something around the house or thinking about our next vacation. Ivan was a real estate agent. She was sharp, social, and good at her job. She was always closing deals, always dressed well, always heading to some networking event with the right smile and the right shoes. I was proud of her. I thought we were one of those couples who had found a rhythm that worked. She would come home late smelling like wine and catered food, kiss me on the cheek, and say she was exhausted before heading upstairs. I never questioned it. Looking back, that kind of blind trust feels noble until it turns into denial. Sometimes what we call peace is just us avoiding a truth we do not want to see. Then one Tuesday morning in March, I walked into the kitchen and found a note on the counter beside the coffee maker. It was short enough to read in one breath and painful enough to remember forever. "I need to find myself again. Don't wait for me. I'm sorry, that was it. No call, no conversation, no chance to ask why." Her car was gone. Half her closet was empty. And when I checked our joint savings account, $80,000 was missing. I still remember standing there in my bathrobe, holding that note, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. It is a strange thing when your whole life changes before you have even had coffee. The first few weeks were brutal. I called her phone more times than I want to admit. Every call went straight to voicemail. I drove by her office. One of her coworkers told me she had taken an indefinite leave. I asked our kids if they knew anything. Owen got defensive right away. He told me she was going through something and needed space, like I was the one being unreasonable for asking where my wife had gone and why she had emptied our account. At the time, I still thought maybe there was some explanation that would make it all make sense. That is one of the hardest parts of betrayal. Your mind keeps trying to rescue the person who hurt you. Months passed. I stopped counting days because counting days made me feel pathetic. I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes. I kept myself busy because being busy felt better than thinking. I woke up, showered, checked the business numbers, mowed the lawn, cleaned the gutters, made lists of little projects around the house I told myself I would finish. That was when I noticed Thea. She moved into the rental across the street in late May. One morning I was out front watering the flower beds Ivan used to take care of. A woman in scrubs stepped out of a beat-up Civic with dark hair in a ponytail, coffee in one hand, keys in the other. She looked tired in that deep, bone-level way only hospital workers seem to look. She gave me a small wave. I nodded back. Her name was Thea Kimball. She was 35, a nurse at County Memorial, never married, living alone in a house that was probably too quiet for someone who worked around noise and crisis all night. At first it was just neighbor stuff. A wave, a hello, a few words about the weather. Then one Saturday she walked over holding a plate of cookies covered in foil and said, "You look like you could use these." They were chocolate chip, a little burnt on the bottom and somehow perfect. She was not flirting. She was just being kind, and after months of feeling like I had been dropped into cold water, simple kindness hit me harder than I expected. A few days later, I brought over pastries. Wednesday mornings became our thing. Thea usually worked nights and slept during the day, but on those mornings, our timing lined up. We'd sit on her porch or in my kitchen with mismatched mugs and strong coffee that was honestly terrible, and we would talk. I told her about the note, about the money, about the silence, about the way being abandoned makes even ordinary parts of your day feel hollow. She listened without rushing to fill the silence. No pity, no fake outrage, just steady attention. Then she told me something I did not expect. Years earlier, my brother Russell had been one of her patients. She recognized my last name and had known who I was when she moved in. She hadn't said anything because she did not want to pry into a stranger's pain. That mattered to me. Honest restraint tells you a lot about a person. Summer came and business at the car washes picked up. July was strong. August was stronger. On paper, my life looked normal again, but the real change was not in my income. It was Wednesday mornings. It was hearing Thea laugh. It was hearing her talk about difficult patients and long shifts and the quiet sadness of losing people even when you do everything right. Little by little, she made life feel warm again. By late summer, we were more than neighbors. Her toothbrush was in my bathroom. I had a key to her place. We never sat down and gave it a label. We just kept showing up for each other until the connection became obvious. Then, almost exactly 1 year after Ivan disappeared, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I've had my fun. Now I'm ready to be a wife again. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a long time before I handed it to Thea. She read it, looked up at me, and asked one question. Are you going to respond? No, I said. There's nothing to say. And I meant it. That text told me everything I needed to know, not that she was sorry, not that she understood the damage she had done, just that she had finished whatever adventure she chose over her family and now wanted to step back into comfort. Let's be honest, that is not remorse. That is a failed exit plan. Over the next 3 days, more messages came in. First casual, then emotional, then manipulative. She said she made a mistake. She said she wanted to come home. She said the kids missed having us together. That last part made my blood boil because by then I had learned something else. Owen and Piper had been sending her money while she was gone. They knew more than they admitted. They had helped support her while I was left holding the house, the business, and the embarrassment of being the last person to understand what had happened. So I called a lawyer. Her name was Barbara Chen, and she was the kind of lawyer who did not waste words. She listened to the timeline, asked direct questions, and told me I had stronger legal standing than I thought. The missing money mattered. The year of abandonment mattered. The lack of contact mattered. She suggested we gather everything we could, including evidence of extramarital affairs if there had been any. I signed a retainer for a private investigator that same afternoon. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted protection. There is a difference. When someone has already shown they can walk back into your life and act like reality is optional, you stop hoping for fairness and start building a file. 2 weeks after that first text, there was a knock on my front door. I looked through the window and saw Ivan standing on the porch, hair perfect, makeup flawless. She looked rested. She looked expensive. She looked like the last year had been a vacation package instead of a betrayal. I did not rush to open the door. I just stood there and looked at her, waiting to feel something. Anger, grief, relief. Some old love trying to wake up. There was nothing. That emptiness told me more than any speech could have. Then Thea came to the top of the stairs behind me. Her hair was damp from a shower and she was wearing one of my old T-shirts. She looked at me, then at the front door, and asked softly, "Want me to answer it?" I stepped back and said, "Yes." Thea opened the door. The moment Ivan saw her, her whole face changed. Then her eyes dropped lower. Thea was 5 months pregnant. We had found out 3 weeks earlier, and I still had not fully taken in what that meant. But in that doorway, seeing Ivan's face go pale, it became real in a new way. The past was standing on the porch, and the future was answering the door. Ivan stared at her and said, "Who are you?" Thea kept her voice calm. "I'm Thea. You need to leave. Russell doesn't want to talk." Ivan tried to look past her for me, but I had already turned away. I went into the kitchen, poured coffee, and let the moment end without me. Some closures do not need a final argument. Sometimes silence is the cleanest answer you can give. 2 days later, Owen showed up in the driveway with his wife, Melissa. He said we needed to talk. He accused me of replacing his mother, of moving a stranger into the house, of getting her pregnant too fast. Melissa backed him up and started talking about community property. I stood there and told them the truth as plainly as I could. This was my house. Their mother left. She took money. She disappeared for a year. Those were not accidents. Those were choices. Then I mentioned the private investigator. Owen's face changed right away. Fear has a look, and once you see it, you do not forget it. He knew there were facts out there that would not make his mother look misunderstood. They would make her look exactly like what she was. Piper reached out later on her own and asked to meet for coffee. She apologized, really apologized, not the kind that asks to be forgiven before it is even finished. She admitted that she and Owen had been sending their mother money. She said they believed Ivan's version of events and were too scared to ask hard questions. Then she told me something I wish I had never heard, but I'm glad I did. At one point while she was gone, Ivan had called Piper laughing about me. She said I was predictable and safe. She said stability starts looking better when you are broke and alone. That was the moment something inside me settled. Not shattered, settled. Because once you hear the truth without decoration, it becomes much easier to stop bargaining with it. I was never the man she deeply valued. I was the reliable place she planned to return to if the exciting version of life fell apart. Court came in February. By then, Barbara had everything organized. The private investigator had done his job. There were hotel receipts, messages, witness statements, and enough evidence of affairs to make the story very clear. Ivan's attorney objected where he could, but the facts were heavier than the arguments. The judge reviewed the abandonment, the year of no contact, the withdrawal of joint funds, and the evidence of adultery. Then he granted the divorce on the grounds of abandonment and adultery. I retained full ownership of the business and the house. Ivan received 15% of the marital assets, reduced by the $80,000 she had taken. My retirement stayed with me. When I walked out of that courthouse with Thea's hand in mine, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not triumphant, just free. There is a difference between winning and being released. What I felt that day was release. After that, life moved forward in the kind of steady way I used to think was boring and now understand is precious. I updated my will. I made sure Thea and our baby would be taken care of. I promoted 2 managers into stronger roles and made the business even more stable and hands-off. Then in late March, our daughter was born. Emma Grace Lawson. 7 pounds 3 ounces, dark hair, small hands, serious little face. The first time I held her, something in my chest shifted. I had loved my children fiercely when they were born, but this felt different in one specific way. It came after I had already lost so much I thought was permanent. Holding Emma felt like proof that life can still begin again when you thought it was only ending. Owen did not come to meet his sister. He did not call. Melissa posted vague things online about betrayal and broken families. Maybe one day he will come around. Maybe he won't. I do not control that anymore. This is another hard lesson people learn late. Love cannot force grown adults to tell the truth. Nearly a year later, I ran into Ivan at a grocery store. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, exactly. More like the shine had gone out of her. She saw Emma in the carrier and congratulated us on the wedding. I nodded and kept walking. No anger, no speech, no need. She was simply someone I used to know. That night, Thea and I sat on the back porch while Emma slept between us in her bassinet. The air was cool. The car washes were doing better than ever. The house felt peaceful in a way I had never fully understood before. Not because nothing bad had happened there, but because nothing false was left in it. Thea reached for my hand and asked, "What are you thinking?" I looked at her. I looked at Emma, and I said how everything had to fall apart so it could come together. Because it was true. If Ivan had never left, I never would have met Thea. I never would have had Emma. I never would have been forced to admit that I was not being deeply loved. I was being kept. For years, I had accepted being someone's reliable option instead of someone's first choice. That sounds small when you say it fast, but it shapes your whole life if you let it. Thea smiled at me and said, "You're my first choice, every single day." Emma made a tiny sound in her sleep, and we both smiled. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is the thing that clears the ground so you can build something honest, and there are a few lessons in that. First, when someone betrays you and then returns only when life gets hard, do not confuse convenience with love. Second, abandonment is not just about leaving a house. It is also about leaving someone to carry confusion, bills, and shame by themselves. Third, if a person treats your stability like a backup plan, they were never protecting your heart. They were protecting their options. Fourth, your children can love you and still be wrong. Family ties do not excuse dishonesty. Fifth, healing does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like coffee on a porch, one kind person, and the slow return of peace. And last, being chosen matters. Not tolerated, not used, not returned to when the world gets difficult. Chosen. So what would you have done if that text came in after a year of silence? Would you have answered the door yourself, or would that have been the moment you finally walked away for good?